So Steve, you've been a frequenter at Appy Hours for a while. You've been doing all kinds of cool stuff. You weren't a transformer.
I was not a transformer. I was an early adopter, but I was not a transformer.
Okay.
So Bumblebee, Optimus Prime, I was not.
That's right. I appreciate kind of the devil's advocate position you always bring to all this stuff. You always kind of you keep it real. You ask the hard questions.
I try.
And in that way, you're an excellent person to have at the table. To kind of like stress test ideas and how faculty might criticize what we're doing with the devices.
And it's kind of funny you mentioned that, right? And I'm thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have picked an Autobot had I been a Transformer. Maybe I should have picked a Decepticon. Anyway, Megatron, Starscream. How nerdy do you want this interview to be?
No, we go full bore. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of where I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff, right? Is all these big programs are great, right? But my task is to figure out how I can use it in my classroom and what kind of effects it's going to give me, right? And so, because if I'm not doing that, right, and I'm not trying to leverage this to help my students out, then in some ways, it's a really big toy for them, right?
Yeah.
I know that's not maybe great phrasing for it, but and there's certainly uses I've had it. Like I've while you've pegged me as the devil's advocate, and I'm always happy to play that role, right? When I started teaching right out of grad school, had the iPad been where I needed it to be at that time, I'd have gone right to iPad. I'd have had all my notes on there. I'd have screencasted from there. But that was 6-7 years ago at this point. For me to make that transition, I needed an iPad Pro.
Yeah,
right? And I needed the scale and I needed the pencil, and the technology just wasn't there quite yet for me, at least within my price bracket. Right? You probably want to edit that part out and that part.
No, it's for real, yeah. Well, and it changes the game for a lot of students here too.
Yeah.
Just everybody, not just everybody having the device, but everybody having a best in class, high powered, iPad Pro.
And the way we've been able to leverage that's the cool thing about it, right? So. I've mentioned using it for my own side of things, like putting my notes on there, putting my slides on there, that kind of thing. But it's easy to have students pull those kind of documents in and then begin to annotate as opposed to just passively taking notes, right? So that's one of the biggest things I know is, most of the classes I do, not all of them, but many of them are flipped in nature, right? And so they're getting case studies or getting this kind of thing. And I used to do it the old school way where I'd print off the case study before class. Of course, I'd have a PDF copy available on Moodle for them. Now I don't bother to print it off, and it doesn't seem like a big change, right? That's if we're going to use the SAMR model, that's an S kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think it starts to move into that augmentation when they're starting to pull, figures from other places and beginning to annotate them, right? It's not uncommon while groups of students are working through their case studies for me to see them doing the 3-screen experience where they have their notes on their iPad, they have their laptop open because it's handy to have, some programs and applications running there, and then they're also checking stuff on their phone.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Wikipedia is on their phone. The internet is the fast thing on their phone, or their calculator is on their phone, so they can run a quick calculation. Maybe they have Excel running on their laptop, and they have their case study on their iPad, and they're split screening with like an old case study and a new case study simultaneously.
Yeah.
Dragging things in, or they're looking at PyMol and they're taking a picture of a protein structure. They're bringing it into their case study and they're annotating it in there. That I think is a much richer experience than just even before when I was doing the flipped classroom. Right?
Well, I actually really like that too, and somebody who's really interested in studying distraction and intention and productivity. A lot of people look at having multiple screens and saying, "Oh, this is multitasking. This doesn't work." But this isn't multitasking.
This is not multitasking. This is monotasking.
Yes.
With multiple resources available to complete that task.
Right, and it's probably even better than just having one screen, because if you had to kind of switch tabs and leave the task on one device, there's a lot of draw to be sucked into something else and distracted.
Yep.
But when you've got them open, you've got all the tools on the table, so to speak, you can kind of get that bird's eye view in the task.
Yeah, and I've found myself doing the 3-screen experience as well, right? iPad's open and I'm grading, take-home exams, your papers on my iPad. Have, stuff running in the background on my laptop, and I'm putting data in as I'm going through. And I got my phone up and I got my calculator on my phone going to town, or,
Yeah.
I got Pandora or Spotify playing, right? And these kind of things. So I have found myself doing the 3-screen experience as well. So even just doing, research, right? It's 3-screen experience. The phone's up for some reason or another. I'm reading a paper on my iPad, and I'm running data calculations in the background on my laptop.
Yeah,
Right?
it helps.
So, yeah.
And you've done some other more pointed implementations of the technology in the classroom.
And so, yeah, that's how would I would so my approach to this has been, I know a lot of people are going to do movies, they're going to do a lot of podcasting, right? Enhanced multimedia presentations. So I've been really trying to find other ways, different workflows of trying to use the iPad. And so, the first way I've been able to approach that is really just that essay, using the case study on the iPad and bringing it into not just a PDF version, but an augmented version, right? The annotation idea. The other thing I've been able to do is start to bring in some other activities. So one of them that I'm particularly proud of, right, is my protein structure scavenger hunt. And I think you're going to talk about that too. Where students are tasked with essentially filling out a bingo form, right, in one app in numbers, where each square is a different protein structural element. Then they have to use, their browser of choice to access the protein data bank to find a protein that has that structural element. And then they have to actually visualize that in an app called PyMol, although there's multiple protein molecular viewing apps you could use. They have to snap a picture of that and then bring it into their bingo card, so to speak. And it's really a way to get them interacting with multiple apps, getting them to really, in a focused way, focus on the structural elements of the protein that I want them to look at, not just playing with the app, not just taking a cursory look, but looking for specific things, so it's honing those visualization skills, and helping them to maybe organize their thinking about these kind of things a little bit.
And so this kind of sets the tone for using a tool that you come back to again and again throughout the course.
Yeah, and they'll use it for both semesters of biochemistry. So biochemistry is split up here at Hiram into a 2-semester sequence, a basic and an intermediate, a 1 and a 2, if you will. The first semester is really focused on how molecular structure influences reactivity and function, right? And with an emphasis on biological molecules, so things like DNA and protein and lipids and carbohydrates, and how their structures affect their function, right, and what they do. The second semester builds on that to start thinking about metabolism and energetics, and when you eat something with carbohydrates, how does your body handle that, right? How does cells handle that? But all of that metabolism stuff happens because of the proteins, and all those proteins happens because of the DNA, et cetera, et cetera. And so that second semester really builds on that first semester. And so even in the second semester, when we're not necessarily doing protein structure function studies to begin with, they're still accessing PyMol and pulling up structures and trying to figure out how that protein is working, so we can understand why that step and that pathway works the way it does.
Fantastic.
Right? So, yeah.
No, I mean, it sounds like a minimum, like a very powerful but simple way of introducing, an app and a mindset and a tone for something they're going to be using for a while.
Yeah.
And so you've also been sort of studying. You've been zooming out. You're now starting to look at test results, right? In terms of how your students are doing after after everyone's had the iPad and after you've started some of this stuff versus before.
So the test you're talking about is the American Chemical Society biochemistry exam, right? So the ACS puts out a series of exams for different courses in the chemistry curriculum. And so I've been using the ACS exam as not a final in my course, but as a low stakes way of judging where students are at. So I use it as essentially bonus points, right? They come in during the final period, and for X number of questions you get correct, I give you a bonus to your course score, right? And it's really functioned as, for me, as a way, like I said, low key, right? To figure out, okay, where are students at? What are they good at? What are they not good at? Are there any kind of patterns I can see? And so, in tracking this exam over the first and the second semester, you have the same exam both semesters. One of the things I've noticed is that to a 95% confidence interval, scores have increased between pre and post tech and trek cohorts.
What was that increase? Something about confidence?
To a 95% confidence level.
Oh,
so
I see.
I've run,
Okay.
A classic students t-test just to see, is there really a difference pre and post? And there is. So, and I've started looking at all the background things that could be influencing that. Like, I'm throwing everything at this question other than tech and trek that I could come up with. Right, so I'm looking at incoming GPAs. I've looked at what courses students have. I've looked at, gender differences. Are there differences, and maybe there's more male or more female in different cohorts. At this point, I can't find anything else that explains that increase. So there is an increase, right? It's 10 to 15% depending on the course. And then, and like I said, this isn't in some ways an unfair exam for them. It's low stakes, it's casual, it's just trying to get a ballpark of where some students are at. But there seems to be a significant difference. So I'm not complete. I would like another year's worth of study because I have 3 years pre, I'd like 3 years post, right? Yeah. I'd like to see some longer term trends before I go, getting super excited about this. But there seems to be, at least in my environment with what the iPad's allowing me to do, a bit of an increase in what students are doing on that exam.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And yeah, initially very exciting. And to me, it kind of captures the richness that's often described and sort of the slipperiness with which, people describe trying to capture learning outcomes or improvements from this sort of stuff. Because when you bring technology into a learning environment, there's a lot going on, and if it's not well designed or implemented or led by the instructor, and if the students aren't meeting them in that space, and it's not intentional, then you might actually have worse outcomes. But what it sounds like is happening is the technology, the fact that it's one-to-one, the fact that it aligns well with your course content and skills, the way that you're implementing it, all start to click into place, and you get a little bit of uptake in learning.
Yeah, and I think you're pretty much right on the mark, right? It's had that iPad just been plopped in front of me, I would have used it, no doubt, right? Full disclosure, I'm a Mac guy, right? Like, there's no doubt about it. I'm airdropping stuff between my MacBook and my iPad on a regular basis, and students take advantage of this and just airdropping assignments right onto my laptop half the time, and not even my iPad. So full disclosure, I'm a Mac guy. But had you just dropped that in front of me, I would have used it. Some of my students would have used it when it was convenient, right? I think because we've tried to do this a little more intentionally, we've had a lot of development with it. I've always enjoyed the appy hours and found them really useful, right? Even if the topic we're not talking about in that particular appy hour is the thing I'm interested in, is that hour where I sit and talk about these kind of things.
Yeah.
It helps me think about what I'm doing in my class. It helps me find out what other people are doing. So even from that aspect, it is devoted time, right? And I think that's a big part of it, of why we've been able to do this. It's aligned. It's given me time to think about it. It's all of those things coming together, I think, has made for a bit of a richer class, and so I'm starting to see some learning outcomes. So
that's wonderful, and I'm really glad. I'm excited about what's going on, and hope the year 3 continues the trend, and you're able to kind of share some of this stuff out.
You and me both.
Well, we'll be following this. We'll have to do a follow-up interview.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing today.
You're welcome.